Hello there, and welcome to Graduate Booster 3, the third session in a series that is intended to introduce you to the people, services, resources that play a role in your academic and research success. And most importantly, it's an opportunity for you to get to know some of the experts in the UNB Libraries world who are worth calling upon when you need them. And so today we have Dr. Tatiana Zaraiskaya, who's going to be speaking about research data management, and then Saran Croos, who will be speaking about patents and patent searching. And I will finish up the session with a talk about knowledge mobilization using the Research Commons Lightboard Studio.
Hi everyone. As you can see from my title, I'm going to talk about research data management. And more specifically, because data management is such a broad area, in this presentation I will be talking about services and support that are valuable for UNB researchers from the UNB library. I'm Tatiana Zaraiskaya, I'm a STEM librarian, and I'm also a research data management specialist at UNB Library. Just to put things in perspective, I want to give you a little bit of my background. As I mentioned, I do provide research services and support in both areas, STEM and RDM for UNB researchers. My educational background is in science, more specifically biochemistry and biophysics, and a little bit of medical biophysics. I'm a member of several initiatives and groups dedicated to research data management. And one of my recent involvement is the Saran working group. It's an international group working on developing and maintaining research data management glossary. I also have been a member of Portage Network Expert Group since 2016. Portage Network is an important project and also the network of people that I would like you to remember the name of it, because over the years this group of people developed a substantial amount of information and resources, also training resources, specifically to Canadian context of the RTM. So currently, Portage going through a substantial rebranding, and now it is renamed to Alliance RDM Team, which became part of the Alliance Canada Digital Research Alliance of Canada. So I will be referring to Portage in my presentations many times. So the first question, which really everyone wants to ask, what is RTM? So RTM stands for Research Data Management, and it involves managing data throughout all phases of the research cycle. What I'm showing on this diagram is the main stages of the research project, what we call research cycle. Every person who involved in academic research goes through these cycles over and over again in their career, so they're very much familiar with this cycle. And of course, the diagram is very, very general. It does not include any details, and it is applicable to all disciplines. So any research project starts with the planning, and following the creation, processing, analyzing data. And for many researchers, it ends at the stage of dissemination, when researchers publish a manuscript in a peer-reviewed journal, and researchers tend to think this is where the cycle stops. And frankly, when I was a student and was doing my research, for me, this is also where the cycle ends. And in my groups, there were not that many discussions that days about what happened with the research data following the publication. The only discussion that I recall was when my supervisor asked, please make sure that we have a copy of your research data on a hard drive or give me a USB. And that was pretty much it. So however, these days, because we do talk about research data management, and most importantly because publishers start require submission of the raw data along with the publication, things change dramatically. We now think about the post-project data or preservation stage of the research data. So why we're doing it? Because, first of all, because the fund is required, because the publishers will not publish your manuscript until they get the actual raw data. But second and most importantly, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel in research lifecycle, we do want researchers to use the data that you generate and build your research on top. This is how, on top of your research, this is how we generate knowledge in academia. So going back to this diagram, what I called active phase of the research project, it basically includes stages from planning to dissemination. But like I said, what's going beyond is all about preserving data, saving it for next generations, for the next researchers who want to use it and reuse it. Hot off the press, maybe not that hot off the press, but recently, Tri-Agency released the new policy on research data management. So the policy was released in March 2021, and I'm giving the link to the policy in case you want to read. Very briefly summarizing the policy, came with no big surprises. This is what we expected to hear in the research data management community, and this is what Tri-Agency were talking about for many years. And actually the first time I heard in 2016 when they promised to release the policy. So the policy actually released in 2021. It can be summarized in three main takeaway points. The first point is not really important for students, but I just want to bring it in because it's there. So it's about institutional strategy. So reading from the Tri-Agency statement, each institution administering Tri-Agency funds is required to create an institutional research data management strategy by March 2023. So, like I said, this is not something that you have to worry about but this is what's in the policy. The second and the third statement is what's relevant to researchers. So the second point is about data management plan. And if we read the policy, for certain funding opportunities, the agency will require DMPs to be submitted to the appropriate agency at the time of publication. And Tri-Agencies promised by spring 2022 to identify those funding opportunities where DMP will be required. At this time, DMP is not required, but it is strongly recommended. And as a student, I'm guessing, but I definitely know that there are some funding opportunities for graduate students. So if you plan to submit any application for funding, that I strongly recommend you to submit data management plan, because this will put your application in a huge advantage compared to others. So the third takeaway point from the policy relates to data deposit. So it reads as grant recipients are required to deposit into a digital repository all digital research data, metadata, and code that directly support the research conclusions. Just a little comment about it. Not all research data that you collect over the research project need to be deposited. You need to deposit only those data sets which directly support conclusions included in a publication. And for some agencies, this is not a big surprise because CHR, for example, required data deposits since January 2008. Okay. What is data management plan in a nutshell? Again, I'm going to refer to Tri-Agency definition. The data management plan is a live document that can be modified to accommodate changes throughout the course of the research project. And this is very important if you think about this definition. So it is not the document that you need to write before you submit manuscript for publication. It is something that you have to think about at early stages, ideally at the planning stage of the research. And it's never too late to think about data management plan. If you're currently involved in a research project, think about data management right now. Whatever stage you are, it is important, and it's still a valuable time span to develop the data management plan. So what is it encompasses? It encompasses a lot of different aspects, and unfortunately I don't have time to talk about all of this. I can briefly say that in data management plan you need to think about what type of data you're collecting, the amount of data. Are you collecting big data on the size of terabytes, or are you collecting gigabytes of data? How are you going to preserve data in case you collect big data, or terabytes, for example? Where are you going to save this data? How are you going to back up your data? Who will have access to this data during the project or beyond the project? How are you going to present your raw data to the publisher in case publisher will require access to raw data at the stage of the publication? Who will be writing metadata and documentation? There's a lot of things to think about, and I don't want to overwhelm you, but I just want to stress that this is a very important aspect of the research project. Data management plan can be written on just without any help. Basically, you don't require to use a specific tools or specific programs. You can write data management plan if you feel strong about it. However, I want to mention about Dmp Assistant tool, which has been developed by Portage Network, and there's a link to it down below. It's assistant.portagenetwork.ca. Data management, Dmp Assistant tool was developed in close collaboration with tri-agency. Therefore, all the guidelines which you will see in that tool, they are very much aligned with the requirements of all the funders. So you cannot go wrong, you cannot go off the rail if you do follow those guidelines. So the Dmp Assistant is a national online bilingual tool, which is also important. You can write in English and French. It allows you to it walks you through their key RDM categories and questions. This is what I call the guidelines. It also includes public DMP exemplars, and it includes customizable DMP templates for various disciplines. Once you log in, you will see the links to examples and the templates that you can use and customize to your research. When you finish writing your data management plan, it can be shared. So you can invite your PI or your peers or colleagues to read and make comments to the plan. It's completely finished. You can export document and attach the exported document to your submission for funding. Let's talk a little bit about research data management repositories. There are two repositories I would like to focus specifically. One of them is UNB Libraries Dataverse. The Dataverse project was originally developed in Harvard, and now if you check on their website, it is adapted rather by many institutions across the globe. So one of these does at UNB. At UNB Library, we do have a Dataverse research repository, which is fully maintained and managed by UNB Libraries. If you go to this website, dataverse.lib.unb.ca, this is where you're going to land. And I want to quickly walk you through the screenshot, what you see on this landing page. At the very top, you'll see the contact and contact us information. This is where you can click and send any questions or emails or requests regarding the data set that you wish to deposit to this repository. Next, on the right side, you will see the Research Data Management Services. This takes you to the website of RDM services at UNB, and also Dmp Assistant link, which takes you directly to Portage Network Dmp Assistant that I just talked about. So what you see below is the basically information about the data sets that we currently have in our repository. So in total, we do have 12 dataverses, which includes 159 files, data sets. These files not only data sets, it also includes data documentation attached to the data sets. And if the person, student or PI asks me to deposit data, I normally help them to write the data documentation, and I provide my suggestions and recommendations according to best practices, how to write it and how it would be better to present this data set. Because think from the user perspective, the user won't see the data first. The first thing they see is the metadata and the data documentation. And based on that information, they decide whether they need to download the data set or not. So as you see, each block, this orange block, which is in the middle of the screen, represents a dataverse. So we do have a data set, the most recent from kinesiology, and the avian research from Biology St. John. So down below, there's a chemistry lab, MRI center, it's a physics department, Mars Science Laboratory, forest management lab, and there is another forest management lab which didn't fit this screen. One thing that I also want to mention, those data sets that I recently curated, 3 of those data sets, the requests came from grad students. So, and I'm really, really pleased about it because it was a grad student who brought this point of depositing data set to the PIs, and then the PI followed their lead, and we opened the dataverse. So the next repository which I wanted to introduce you is called FERDA, or Federated Research Data Repository. This repository is available to all researchers in Canada, not only UNB. Any researcher can create login and request data deposit. The focus of this repository is mostly on the big data, and there is absolutely no limitations in terms of how much data you can deposit. If you have 10 terabytes, they can take it as long as you need it. And you need to describe, of course, all that terabytes of data. So FERDA has 2 layers of service. The first layer is discovery layer. As you see there's a search string. Then you can enter any keywords and start searching for the data sets. The dataverse that I mentioned in the previous slide is harvested by FERDA, so it will be available. All data set deposited in dataverse will appear in FERDA search. So it's discovery layer and then also deposit layer. So you can request, like I mentioned, to deposit the data set into this repository. And someone will contact you before they actually press the button and release this data set for public consumption. So because, as you may see at the very bottom, FERDA is a project conducted in collaboration with Portage and Compute Canada. They do have the preservation capacity. So the data they deposited, they are preserved for a long period of time. So this is where we really talk about the long-term preservation of the data. So I would like to show you their web page of research data management services at UNB libraries. We have one page at the moment, but we plan to expand it substantially. The link to this webpage is lib.umb.ca/RTM. And you will see links to all this information that I just covered, to Dmp Assistant, further, also links to training resources developed by Portage. At the very bottom, contact information. So there are 3 of us currently, there are 4 RTM people. Siobhan Hanradi, myself, Tatiana Zaraiskaya, and Mike Nason. And we work as a team because, like I said at the very beginning, RTM is such a huge umbrella term. It is only can be handled by a group of people. You can send us email if you're thinking about depositing data into Dataverse or have any questions relevant to the data that you're generating in your research project. And you're also welcome to come and see us in person. We're located on this level part. Hill Library, Research Commons, 3rd floor. The absolute last slide, I would like to highlight the guideline, the LibGuide that I developed for all researchers, most of the students. This is where you can find all details about preparing data for publication. I would like to mention that all I said earlier about the funders and depositing data, students, you don't have to worry about it. You're not making any decisions on your own. So, but you may initiate discussion in your lab or conversation with your PI about funding requirements and everything that I mentioned about data management plan and repositories of data and so on and so on. So for the students, I think this LibGuide will be a very good start because it will walk you through the process. What is really data management in the lab, basically? How do I need to name my files? Because the good data management really starts with good naming of the files, with saving files in the right format that it can be preserved over a long period of time. So you will find all this information on my LibGuide, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And with that, I'm going to finish. Thank you very much for listening. Any questions, please send me a question to this email. Thank you very much.
Good. Okay, so Saran Croos, librarian for computer science and engineering, is going to be talking about patents and patent searching.
So hi everybody. So I'm basically going to provide an overview of the patent workshop that I usually do a couple of times a year. So the full workshop usually takes about a couple hours. I'm going to give an overview about the workshop in 15 minutes. So okay, so in order to go to the next slide. Okay, so the workshop usually has a couple of parts. So I usually provide the overview where we have some great discussions about the topics that are sort of, I guess, like related to patents. So the topics that we include are things like what is the patent and the overview of the patent literature. And also we talked about why patent searching is important for your research. And then we talk about some of the challenges as well. So the first part, usually we have interactive, it's very interactive. We have a discussion, we talk about all these topics. Then the second part, like I do some hands-on examples. So the hands-on examples are really important because it allows everyone to go into specific patent resources, and after that they'll be able to use them, and I'll be able to guide them through that. So the hands-on area is like really important. So okay, I'm going to talk about the workshop a little bit more. So okay, so in the interactive component, in the beginning of the workshop, we usually talk about things like what is a patent in Canada. So for example, a patent is a legal document that's granted to you by the government of Canada. And a patent confirms your exclusive right to your invention up to 20 years. And then we also talk about the patent invented can be a product or a composition or a machine or a process, right? So all these aspects we have discussions, because usually grad students will come up with their own topics here to the workshop, and I try to aid them with their own topics so that way they're not really spending time talking about other topics that aren't related to what they're actually working on. Okay, and then the workshop also talks about the types of patent searches. So as you can see here, there are a couple of types of patent searches. You have the patentability, where you are trying to get a patent, right? So you're inventing something and you're trying to get a patent, as opposed to the other one, which is the freedom to operate. So freedom to operate is a hard one because you have to figure out all the roadblocks as well as the infringements if you're introducing brand new products and services to, let's say, Canada, right? So it's really important to understand the types of patent searches. Okay, so I also talk about in the workshop about patent applications versus the patents, the granted patents. Why they're important. So, for example, patent applications, if you're doing current trends in technology, let's say, you have to look at the patent applications, because the granted patents, it could take up to 4 or 5 years for a patent to be granted. So, because there's a process called even public review, which takes place about 18 months. It has to be open to the public to go and see what's happening. If the invention is really, I guess, a brand new invention, right? So we talk about that in the first half of the workshop about patent applications versus granted patents. And then we also talk about the types of patents that are available in Canada, right? So, for example, in Canada, you are able to get a patent for a product, a composition, a machine, or a process, or any of the improvements to all those top there. So, from the discussion, we talk about when the grad students usually when they come up with their own technology, if they explain to me what they're sort of working on, that we could see where their technology would fit into these 5 categories. And after that, we try to help them from that on. And the other thing I also talk about is the search strategy. Hopefully you can see it on top there. It's the search strategy is really important. So you have to understand that there are a couple of components, right? There are 2 main components to a patent document. So you have the claims and the description. The claims are really important because it tells you what your exclusive, I guess, the government has granted, what has been granted to you in terms of your product. So, could actually explain what. Okay, trying to say in a way. So, for example, let's say if you're sort of I guess looking at a cup, right? A claim could be for the cup's handle, or it could be the whole cup itself. So you have to just make sure that you understand the claims really well. So we go through that and we look at all the ways the claims are defined. So it's really important to do that, and also the description. The description is really a key to understanding how you could be searching the patent resources. So we go through all of that. And the search strategy is really important because, in order for you to understand this, to do a search well, you have to understand all the fields. So we have all these fields like titles, abstract, claims, description, inventors, as well as other ones that you need to be comfortable with when you're searching the patent resources. So we go through that, and I try to explain and help with them with all that. And the other search strategy that's really, really important is searching with the classification codes. So that's really important because the patent resources, unlike all the other regular, I guess library databases, that you cannot just use keywords. You have to use the classification symbols. So like we go through the scheme and try to explain where their technology or their services that they're working on would fit into the classification scheme. So the classification scheme right now I'm looking at right now is the International Patent Classification, which is called IPC. So the IPC is a hierarchical patent classification system. Again, the classification system is used by over 100 countries. So if you are searching with, like obviously using the patent classification, you are able to search more than a single location, right? You could look at all the countries who use the IPC classification system. And also the other classification system that we look at that's being used by the Americans is it's called the Cooperative Patent Classification, which is an extension of the IPC, the one that I talked about earlier. So that one is important because the CPC classification is what, like how all of the American, the US ones are classified. So if you have to understand the classification scheme quite well in order to get the great search results. Okay, in terms of the grand workshop that I do, like usually I do the workshop a couple of times a year. So in the second part of the workshop, I usually do hands-on stuff, so applied stuff. So I go through all of the resources that I have listed on my subject guides for the patents. So as you can see here, we have an introduction as well as I have all the key resources as well as other resources that would be useful. So I go through that. This is a screenshot, so obviously I can't show you the whole thing. So I have listed here all sorts of resources that would be useful for you to go and look at. And we also spent some time with the TIPO database, which is the Canadian one. So the Canadian Intellectual Property Office has its own database. So we go through some of the key resources on there, and after that we look at the patent applications and the patents on there and how to retrieve them well and effectively. So the other hands-on experience, the hands-on activity that we do is look at the USPTO. So that's really important because there are tons of patents and applications on there. It's way larger than the Canadian one, obviously, so we have to make sure that you know how to use the patent database quite well. So I go through all the fields and I explain how to look at patents as well as the patent applications on there, and then and the other also we spend some time looking at the aggregators. The aggregators are like the Google, right? So the aggregators are great for searching multiple jurisdictions at once. Also in Google, there's more than 87 million patents and patent application indexed. So it's really important to use Google and also use the proper way, right? So you have to use the classification scheme as well as keywords here. So also Google allows you to search about 17 patent offices. And the second last thing that we cover is patent scope, which is a database that's run by the World Intellectual Property Office. So it's really important because it covers more than 50 countries on there, as well as the great thing about this database is it has translated into 18 languages. So you could read them in your own languages if you have one of the 18 languages that are translator. And the very last thing I'm going to show you is this here, the tense.org, which is important because you're able to do a whole bunch of things with this resource. It has the ability to analyze information, the pattern landscape, as well as you'll be able to see infographics from there as well. So I go through that and I tell people how to use this resource quite well. Yeah, so if you have any questions, let me know, and this is it.
Okay, great. So I am appearing live in the Lightboard studio from my laptop. And so I'll do a little turn here so you can see where I am. There's a couple of monitors behind me, unless I turn around and then they're in front of me. Basically, what I wanted to do is begin a series that slots into the end of some of the booster sessions having to do with how the Harriet Irving Library Research Commons, the sponsor of the booster series, and the third floor of the Harriet Irving Library can help you in your knowledge mobilization initiatives, whether you're on campus or off, but in this case, we're talking specifically about a studio in the Research Commons called the Lightboard Studio. And so knowledge mobilization, what is that exactly? It can be distinguished, I guess, from what's often called scholarly communication, which has to do with kind of a peer-to-peer sending articles and correspondences between scholars who are working in similar field, if not on the same projects. Whereas knowledge mobilization, at least in the sense that we're talking about it today, has more to do with how your research has an impact outside of your field, or how you are able to persuade funders to help you with your research and those sorts of things. But basically, how do you make your message and make your knowledge more well-known and applicable, potentially, outside of your actual discipline? So probably the most impactful way for knowledge mobilization to happen in these days, if not the most necessary way, is through video. We've certainly been more steeped in video over the last little while than ever before. Just thinking of what's been going on the last little while at UNB, there was a pitch competition, a business pitch competition that closed a couple of days ago, where folks were invited to submit a 60-second maximum video pitching an entrepreneurial idea, and this sort of thing is happening all over the place. Or if you're teaching a class or submitting a video pitch, for lack of a better word, to a funder, where you're sitting in front of your laptop the way that I am right now, talking about what your research is going to look like, and maybe you're flashing to some PowerPoint slides and that sort of thing. Well, what's happening more and more in various types of institutions, and certainly in academia, is that we are developing studio spaces capable of broadcast quality recordings and synchronous engagement, so that you can overcome a couple of obstacles to meaningful and impactful knowledge mobilization via video. And the first would be technology. As you've probably noticed in different situations, if you don't have a good microphone, or if the lighting is bad, whatever the case may be, then the technological obstacles can distract from your actual message and the content that you're trying to convey. And related to that, the content can certainly be augmented if you understand how to leverage the technology and the attendant techniques that go with it. And that's where the Lightboard Studio comes in. So now I'm broadcasting directly from the Lightboard Studio, and what I have in front of me is a transparent, translucent. You can see as I bring my hands towards the edge, there's actually light there on the sides. Whiteboard or Lightboard, upon which I can actually write. Above me is a broadcast quality microphone, and I'm looking into a 4K camera. The lights are all set up. Somebody doesn't have to know a whole lot about the technology to come in and use a space like this. And that's very much how these sorts of studios are being deployed here and there. You might ask yourself, well, this is all well and good if I'm in the STEM disciplines, because they're used to using whiteboards and that sort of thing, right? So there's a win for that. But let's say that you are in the social sciences. You think, well, what would I ever use something like this for? Well, let's imagine that you are wishing to graphically represent an idea or concept, which certainly happens in some of the better PowerPoints out there. And you're looking for a way to more meaningfully engage with an audience. Then having a space where you could, for example, be overlaying material such as this. Basically, the Lightboard, what it allows you to do is present, annotate, and comment on your ideas and the ideas of others, which of course demonstrates the dynamism inherent in scholarly discourse. And so just as an example, this is from some of my own research, which is riffing off of Edward Hall's work in intercultural communication theory. And in my case, its application to the online realm. And basically the gist of this is that if you understand culture as a set of values and behaviors unique to defined groups, then we each contain multitudes. We're a product of our upbringing, the place that we grow up, religion perhaps, ethnicity, personal history, the activities that we have engaged with in our lives or continue to engage with. These are all overlapping to form our identities, and we bring all of those to our interpersonal relations, which is really an always changing dynamic space, this culture of dealing that depends on which of our identities we're prioritizing and how they play off against one another. So what happens in a real-time situation when we're together, that has a certain feel to it, but what happens when we port this into the online realm and specifically somewhere like Teams? Well, as you've probably experienced yourself, it tends to feel a little disembodied. It's, of course, two-dimensional. Often it can be disengaging. But if you take something like this into a dynamic studio space, like the Lightboard studio, where you can actually be working with your ideas in real time, or at least dynamically with an audience, synchronously or asynchronously, then you're feeling much more embodied. Can't get that O in the embodied, can I? And it becomes a more engaging experience. Not only that, but it becomes more of a marriage of the personal with the content, which is really what the booster series is intended to be. So using these sorts of spaces can be a win-win for both the audience and the presenter. The audience gets to enjoy from the comfort of their own home or office a more engaging experience and get to see more going on than just slides passing by or a poorly lit office space. While from a presenter's perspective, you feel, I can say, much more kinetically involved with your content, and therefore it gives you a sense of ownership over what you're doing in this space. So doing this sort of thing, is it worth it? What would it take? Let's say you had to do a 3-minute research pitch that you were submitting with a funding application. What would it involve? So we'll say 3-minute pitch. First of all, you probably have to book the space. And then in a case like this where you've never been to the Lightboard studio, you'd probably want to come in and play around for a little bit, develop your presentation, maybe invert some line drawings like I've done here. It basically works off of a black background. So if you found in this case, a storyboard slide, which is typically black on white when it's a line drawing. You just invert those images to present in the Lightboard Studio. Then you'd probably want to come in and practice a little bit. And then we might want to actually record what we're doing. And then if there was any post-production, which is to say if you were going to, say, add some music or some overlays of images, whatever you wanted to do. And finally, you would release it. What would this all take? The booking would probably take you 30 seconds. Playing around, well, that's up to you, but let's say you spent 30 minutes in here. Developing a presentation, whether it was here or elsewhere, it's going to take a little bit of time. Let's say for the sake of argument, you spent 60 minutes on that. You spent 5 minutes inverting line drawings, which is mostly just opening an application like Photoshop or GIMP. You practiced for another 30 minutes. And then you recorded what you were doing. Let's say 3-minute pitch, you might run it a few times to just get it right. Let's say another 30 minutes. Post-production, we could run from 5 minutes to 120 minutes. Let's split the difference and say you spent an hour on it because you're a bit of a perfectionist. So what does that give us? I guess that's 90 minutes, 150 minutes, and then 210 minutes. So 210 minutes. Is that a lot of time to invest versus putting a PowerPoint presentation together and then conducting a voiceover and maybe cutting to something that you've done on your phone of yourself? I leave it up to you. It depends on how much you value knowledge mobilization and what role it might play in your particular endeavor. In any case, I wanted to at least showcase this sort of space so you had a sense of what was available at the Harriet Irving Library Research Commons. We also have an audio studio for podcasting and doing the sort of voiceovers that might be of interest for different sorts of projects. I'm going to leave you off now with a quick video shot in this studio with students working on a variety of projects, just so you have a sense of some of the breadth of applications that a space like this can be put to.
In the summer months, when the water gets pretty warm around the equator region, humpback whales travel from this area further up north near New Brunswick and Nova Scotia.
And then the pricing models go with a competition lit,
You have to look there, but you're drawing here. Come check it out.